Storm clouds pressed low over the city, blotting out the stars, and the neon signs of St. Aldan Memorial Hospital flickered in the intermittent rain. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly as Emily Carter wiped down the final trauma bay. Her hands were raw from constant hand-washing and sanitizing. Her scrubs were streaked with a mixture of sweat, antiseptic, and streaks of crimson that refused to wash out completely. 14 hours of relentless chaos had passed, and she was exhausted, but the patients never paused. They didn't care about fatigue. They didn't care about the clock ticking past 11 p.m. She had treated a teenager with a compound fracture from a car crash, a man in his 60s struggling with heart failure, and a young mother who had collapsed during a seizure. Every case demanded precision, empathy, and speed. Emily's heartbeat felt like a metronome in the quiet moments between crises, her mind constantly ticking through protocols, dosages, procedures. Finally, she peeled off her gloves for the 6th time that hour, letting her hands breathe for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. She tied her hair back, tugged the straps of her mask loose, and inhaled deeply. It was almost over. Almost. Her colleague, a younger nurse named Jenna, peeked out from the supply closet. "You look like death warmed over," she said, smirking. Emily managed a tired smile. "Thanks, just another night in paradise, huh?" Jenna rolled her eyes. "You mean the 14-hour tour of hell? Go on, get out of here. I've got the night shift covered." Emily exhaled, packing her stethoscope into her bag. Her legs felt like concrete pillars. Every muscle screamed. But even as exhaustion crept in, a familiar sense of pride warmed her chest. She spent her life in the service of others. Her family had always said she was born to help people, and tonight had reminded her why. The clock read 11:07 p.m. when she stepped outside into the parking lot. Rain had begun to drizzle lightly, beads of water dancing on the asphalt. She slipped on her jacket and adjusted her bag over her shoulder. All she wanted was the quiet, the solitude of her small apartment, and a hot shower that could chase the grime and tension away. But the moment her foot touched the wet asphalt, the world beneath her feet shivered. A low hum vibrated in the soles of her shoes. She froze, squinting into the darkness. Thunder? No, it was too rhythmic, too controlled. A low, mechanical growl rose behind her, echoing against the hospital walls. Emily's gaze lifted, her stomach dropped. In the distance, a massive silhouette materialized through the rain and darkness, a helicopter, military, unmistakable. Its rotors cut into the night sky with a deafening, chopping rhythm. Searchlights swept the parking lot in wide, aggressive arcs, illuminating puddles and shadows. Her heart skipped a beat. What the hell?" she whispered, stepping back instinctively. The helicopter descended rapidly, kicking up a maelstrom of wind and water that whipped her hair into a tangled mess and drenched her jacket. The roar filled her ears, drowning out the quiet hum of the city. She pressed herself against the curb, her pulse hammering in her throat. 3 figures appeared in the doorway of the helicopter. Soldiers, boots hitting the landing pad with deliberate, synchronized force. Each moved with the precision of someone trained to react instantly, to obey without question, to follow orders with ruthless efficiency. And all 3 were heading straight for her. Emily's mind raced. What could this possibly be? Military personnel didn't show up at civilian hospitals unannounced unless something catastrophic had happened. But she knew of no incident, no emergency, nothing that warranted this. The tallest soldier reached the edge of the parking lot. His hand rose sharply in a crisp salute. "Ma'am," he said over the roar of the rotors, his voice cutting through the wind, "we've been sent for you." Emily's mouth went dry. "For me," she croaked. I think there's a mistake. I'm just a nurse. I finish my shifts, that's all." The soldier's expression didn't waver. "You're Emily Carter." Yes, her voice was barely audible above the wind. "But what is this about?" "Ma'am, we have direct orders to escort you immediately." Emily's brain refused to process the words. "Escort me? To where? Why?" The soldier's eyes flicked to the helicopter behind him. Something in their steel blue depths was unnerving, reverence, urgency, maybe even fear. "We're not at liberty to explain here. Please, with your permission, we need to leave. Now." Emily felt the weight of the moment settle over her shoulders like concrete. Her body stiffened, her instincts screaming that something monumental was unfolding, something beyond her comprehension. Memories of her long years as a nurse, years spent holding hands through pain, comforting strangers in the dead of night, witnessing life and death in its rawest forms, did little to prepare her for this. "Wait," she gasped, stepping closer, rain plastering her jacket to her body. "Can someone please tell me what this is about?" The soldier exhaled, a sound heavy with resignation. "It's about Corporal Mason Hale." The name struck Emily like a lightning bolt. Her heart lurched violently. Mason, the young soldier she had tended to 3 nights ago, the one with the broken wrist and the chest wound that had nearly cost him his life, the one who had looked at her with eyes that pleaded for safety she couldn't promise, he was the reason for this. "Corporal Hale," she whispered, her voice trembling, "what happened?" The soldier's jaw tightened. "He requested you by name." The rain intensified, soaking her hair and dripping down her neck. Emily felt herself teetering on the edge between disbelief and dread. Mason had survived against all odds, but now he wasn't just a patient. He was a reason someone had come for her in the dead of night. Before she could ask another question, the voice crackled over the radio in the helicopter. "Urgency level upgraded. Get her aboard, now." The soldier's eyes locked on hers. "Ma'am, that means we have no more time. Step forward." Her stomach twisted with adrenaline, fear, and curiosity. She had saved lives before, faced chaos, and held the line through disaster, but nothing in her world had prepared her for this. A helicopter, soldiers, the name of a patient, and a command that brooked no refusal. With a trembling hand, she reached for the ladder. Each step felt surreal, almost cinematic, her boots slipping slightly against the wet metal. She glanced down at the parking lot she had just left behind, the hospital lights fading beneath the rotor's shadow. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She was leaving everything familiar behind, the hospital, her routine, her certainty, and stepping into a world she had never imagined. The soldiers flanked her as she reached the helicopter cabin, their presence both reassuring and intimidating. The rotor washed through her hair and jacket into a chaotic dance. She slid into a seat, heart hammering, and fastened her seatbelt with hands that shook despite her years of experience handling emergencies. As the blades roared to full speed, lifting them into the stormy night, Emily pressed her forehead against the window. The city below was a blur of lights and rain, a world she recognized, yet suddenly alien, and somewhere out there, beyond the clouds, the darkness, and the storm, was Mason Hale. The soldier beside her handed her a headset. "You'll need to hear us over the noise. Don't remove it." Emily obeyed, her mind spinning. Questions collided like high-speed collisions. What had happened to Mason? Why was she the only person they trusted? What danger awaited him, and now her? As the helicopter gained altitude, rain pelting the windows, Emily realized she was about to be thrust into a world of secrets, danger, and decisions that would test every ounce of her courage. She was just a nurse, but tonight the stakes were higher than she could imagine. And then, through the blinding rotors and wind, Emily caught sight of something that froze her in place. A cluster of lights on the distant horizon, the unmistakable formation of military vehicles surrounding a sprawling building. And at its center, flashing, chaotic, alive with urgency, was a base she recognized from news reports, Fort Lockridge. Her stomach dropped, her pulse surged. Whatever awaited her there, it was no longer a shift, it was a mission. The helicopter cabin was a cacophony of roaring blades, rattling metal, and the faint hum of instrument panels, yet Emily Carter's mind was deafened by the questions spinning out of control. Her pulse thrummed in her ears as she gripped the armrests, knuckles white. "Ma'am," the soldier beside her said again, calm yet urgent, "we need to know you understand the gravity of this mission. Do you?" Emily swallowed, trying to steady herself. I understand that a patient, Mason Hale, requested me, but I don't understand why it's so urgent that I leave the hospital, right now, in the middle of the night, with military personnel." The soldier's gaze was unwavering. "Ma'am, you've saved his life before. He trusts you in a way no one else can. That trust, it's critical." Her heart clenched. Mason had been in agony for 3 nights, whispering through pain, gripping her hands as she guided him through every invasive procedure. He had survived because of her, and now they were saying he needed her again. The helicopter lurched violently as it cut through a pocket of turbulent air. Emily pressed herself against the seat, a brief scream escaping her throat. The soldier gave a half-nod of acknowledgement, unflinching. "Where exactly are we going?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Fort Lockridge," he said simply. Her breath caught. The military base on the outskirts of the state, strictly restricted, high security, not even family could enter without multiple clearances. "Fort Lockridge," she echoed. Why would a nurse, why would I be going there?" He hesitated, a microsecond of vulnerability flashing across his face. "Ma'am, you need to trust that this is necessary. Mason Hale refuses intervention from anyone else." Emily shook her head, the words barely registering. "Refuses intervention? He's just a patient. He can't know the consequences of his refusal." The soldier's expression hardened. "He knows exactly what he's risking, and he's asked for you." The phrase echoed in her mind like a bell tolling in an empty cathedral. Mason had asked for her. He trusted her more than anyone else on the planet. Her throat tightened. The responsibility pressed down like a physical weight on her chest. Emily's fingers trembled as she fastened the headset over her ears. The radio crackled, static slicing through the rotor noise. A voice, clipped and authoritative, came through. Urgency level upgraded. Get her aboard, now. The soldier beside her exhaled, tension rippling in his shoulders. That's an official order from the chain of command, ma'am. They've classified this situation as a high-priority emergency. There is no discretion. Your presence is mandatory. Emily's stomach twisted. Classified, emergency, mandatory. None of these were words she had ever associated with her life as a nurse. Her world had been hospitals, scrubs, emergencies, but always within walls she understood. Now it had expanded into something far larger and far more dangerous. Her mind flitted to Mason. She pictured his pale face, the trembling hands, the trust and fear coiled tightly in his eyes. "Okay," she said finally, voice quivering but firm. "I'll go, but someone has to explain what's happening when we land. I need to know what I'm walking into." The soldier nodded, his jaw tight. "Once we land, ma'am, all will be explained in due time, but you must understand, time is critical." Emily took a deep breath, trying to summon courage she wasn't sure she had. She had been in high-stakes situations before, ER rooms filled with chaos, patients fighting for every breath, but nothing had prepared her for a military helicopter, soldiers at her side, heading into a classified situation she couldn't even begin to comprehend. The storm intensified outside, rain streaking across the windows like silver knives. Lightning flickered, illuminating the helicopter interior in stark white flashes, throwing the soldiers' stern, masked faces into sharp relief. Emily's eyes darted to each of them, professional, disciplined, unwavering. They didn't flinch, they didn't question, and they clearly weren't afraid of anything. Yet she could feel the weight of their focus on her. She was the reason they were here. Her thoughts turned inward. She had always believed in control, in preparedness, in methodical action. But this was chaos she couldn't measure, fear she couldn't rationalize, and yet there was no turning back. Mason's life depended on her. Hours or maybe minutes later, time had blurred. The helicopter pierced the low-hanging clouds. Emily pressed her forehead to the glass, rain streaking against the window pane, and glimpsed the vast expanse of Fort Lockridge below. Lights flashed in rapid succession. Military vehicles moved in disciplined formation. Soldiers ran across the tarmac like ants, rifles slung, faces grim, eyes vigilant. Her heart hammered in her chest. Mason was somewhere in that storm of precision and danger, and she had to find him. The soldier beside her handed her a small, laminated card with basic instructions. "Ma'am, protocols you must follow when interacting with the corporal. Do not reveal sensitive information. Your primary goal is his safety and stabilization." Emily nodded, absorbing each word, even as adrenaline surged through her veins. Her fingers gripped the card until it creased. She had been a nurse for nearly a decade. She had treated trauma, shock, cardiac arrests, but never had she been entrusted with a patient's life under the threat of classified military operations, secrecy, and unknown danger. The helicopter shuddered violently and she instinctively leaned into the seat. "Are we under attack?" she asked, fear threading her voice. "No, ma'am," the soldier replied. "Turbulence, storm ahead." His tone was steady, but Emily caught a flicker of concern in his eyes. The storm wasn't just in the sky, it was everywhere, palpable, like the tension in the helicopter cabin. Lightning illuminated the night again, and for a moment, Emily thought she could see movement on the ground, flashes of men, frantic, precise, rushing somewhere. Her pulse surged. Mason was out there, somewhere in the storm, and her presence was the only thing keeping him alive. "Why me?" she whispered to herself, voice trembling. "Why does he trust me more than anyone else?" A memory intruded, Mason lying in her arms after the explosion, whispering her name, terrified of dying alone. She had promised him she would stay. She had held his hand as the medics stabilized him, her own heart breaking with each wince of pain he endured. And now she realized that promise hadn't ended in the hospital. It had carried into this storm, into this helicopter, into the heart of Fort Lockridge itself. The rotors dipped as they approached the landing zone, and Emily could see the floodlights cutting through the darkness, illuminating rows of military personnel standing at rigid attention. Vehicles were positioned with tactical precision. The chaos of urgency was tempered by discipline. Every soldier knew their role. The helicopter touched down, and the storm's roar seemed to intensify as the rotors kicked up rain and debris. Emily's legs shook as she unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped toward the ladder. The soldier beside her extended a steady hand. She took it, her own shaking. She climbed down, the wet metal ladder slippery beneath her boots, and landed on the tarmac with a soft thud. Soldiers flanked her, guiding her through the illuminated chaos. The The wind whipped her hair into her face, rain soaking her jacket, but she barely noticed. Then she saw them, Mason's unit. Soldiers standing at attention, rifles slung, faces a mixture of concern, discipline, and urgency. And at their center, a man she had prayed for countless times, Mason Hale, his chest rising and falling with labored breaths. Her heart lurched. She had to reach him. She had to be the lifeline he had asked for. And as she moved toward him, the lead soldier raised his hand once more in a perfect salute. "Ma'am," he called over the roar of the storm and rotors, "we've been sent for you." Emily froze, her chest tightened. She was no longer just a nurse finishing her shift. She was a guardian, a lifeline, and possibly the only person who could keep Mason Hale alive. The roar of the helicopter filled Emily Carter's ears, vibrating through her bones as the aircraft lifted off the wet tarmac of St. Alden Memorial Hospital. The storm had intensified, rain pelting the windows with relentless fury, lightning flashing through the night like jagged white knives. She pressed her forehead against the cold glass, trying to steady her racing heartbeat. Below, the city was reduced to a blur of neon and reflection, indistinct and distant. Above, darkness stretched endlessly, a void she was hurtling into, carrying Mason Hale's life in her hands. Beside her, the soldier's gaze was fixed forward, calm, controlled, yet a faint tension betrayed the gravity of their mission. He handed her a headset, the static and roar of the rotors now intelligible through it. "Ma'am, we're entering a high-priority corridor," he said. "Communication is critical. Keep this on at all times, understood?" Emily nodded, fingers trembling as she adjusted the headset. Understood. Her throat was dry, words barely forming. She could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. This was no longer a hospital emergency. This was something far beyond. The helicopter jolted violently, pitching sideways as it sliced through a pocket of turbulence. Emily gripped the armrests, stomach lurching. Lightning illuminated the interior in stark, fleeting white flashes, revealing the disciplined faces of the soldiers. Each man and woman moved with practiced precision, harnessed focus. Their calm was unnerving. They were trained for danger. She was not. She thought of Mason. She pictured his pale face, the fear and trust etched into his features, the way his fingers had gripped hers as she guided him through the worst of his injuries. He had survived against all odds, and now she was being thrust into a situation where he was counting on her again. "Ma'am," the soldier said, his voice low and steady, "once we land, you must be prepared for rapid deployment. Mason's condition is unstable." Emily's pulse quickened. "Unstable how?" she whispered. The soldier's jaw tightened. "He's refusing intervention from anyone but you. He's in physical distress and emotional distress. He trusts you. That's all you need to know for now." Emily exhaled shakily. She had been a nurse for nearly a decade, but nothing in her experience had prepared her for this. A patient whose life depended not just on her skill, but on her presence in a situation shrouded in secrecy, surrounded by military personnel, and against a backdrop of unknown danger. The helicopter leveled out above the darkened landscape, and Emily pressed her face again to the glass. Rain streaked down in silver lines, illuminated by the intermittent flashes of lightning. In the distance, she saw lights cutting through the darkness, rows of military vehicles forming a perimeter around a sprawling complex. Soldiers moved with disciplined urgency, rifles at the ready, eyes scanning the stormy horizon. Fort Lockridge, her stomach tightened. She had seen it in news reports, but only as a distant, untouchable place, a symbol of military precision and secrecy, and now she was headed straight for it. "Brace yourself," the soldier said. "This is the first time she's ever been called in for a classified emergency," he muttered to someone over the headset, glancing at Emily. Emily's mind spun. Classified emergency. What could be so critical that Mason's life, and potentially hers, depended on her immediate presence? She thought of the explosion, the injuries, the night spent holding Mason's hand as he fought for life. Now she was being pulled into something that felt bigger than anything she had ever faced, and the storm outside mirrored the storm of fear and anticipation in her chest. The helicopter dipped again, the rotors slicing the heavy rain, tossing Emily against her seat. She gritted her teeth. Every fiber of her being screamed to hold on. The storm was relentless, and the night seemed alive with danger, as if it knew she was coming, as if it had conspired to test her. Lightning struck closer this time, illuminating the ground below. Emily caught glimpses of armored vehicles, soldiers sprinting with disciplined urgency, their faces grim, every movement precise. Somewhere in that chaotic precision was Mason. Somewhere in that storm, he was waiting for her. The soldier beside her leaned slightly. "We're approaching the landing zone," he said. His calmness was a tether in the maelstrom, but Emily could feel the tension coiling in the air, thick and electric. The helicopter dipped lower, the rotors throwing rain in sheets, water spraying into Emily's face. She blinked rapidly, trying to see through the deluge. Then, through the streaks of rain and flashes of lightning, she saw the lights of the landing pad at Fort Lockridge blinking and bright against the darkness. Soldiers lined the tarmac, their bodies rigid with attention. Vehicles were positioned strategically, forming a controlled perimeter. This was no routine arrival. Her heart thumped violently. Mason's life was in this place, somewhere among the chaos. And she, the nurse, the civilian, the observer of life and death from a hospital corridor, was now part of a high-stakes military operation. The helicopter landed with a thunderous roar, the blades whipping the rain around them in a chaotic spiral. Emily's boot slipped slightly as she unfastened her seatbelt, and the soldier extended a hand. She took it, gripping it with all the strength she could summon. Her legs trembled under the weight of adrenaline and fear. As she stepped onto the tarmac, the roar of the rotors still reverberating in her ears, Emily realized that nothing in her life had prepared her for this. She was being thrust into a world of precision, secrecy, and danger, a world where every decision, every step could mean life or death. The soldiers flanked her as she walked toward the massive building at the center of the complex. The storm ripped at her jacket, rain plastering her hair to her face, but she barely noticed. Every step forward was a step into the unknown, and the unknown loomed large, heavy, and inescapable. And then she saw him, Mason Hale, pale, trembling, but alive. His eyes met hers, and in that instant, all fear, all exhaustion, all doubt melted away. He had waited for her, called for her, needed her, and she had come. The soldier beside her raised his hand in a crisp salute, voice cutting through the storm. "Ma'am, we've been sent for you." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She was no longer just a nurse finishing a shift. She was the lifeline, the anchor, the tether to life that Mason Hale clung to. And as she took another step forward, rain soaking her to the bone, she realized she had no choice but to enter this storm fully, to confront the danger, the secrets, and the unknown that awaited inside Fort Lockridge. Her pulse raced as adrenaline surged. Questions burned in her mind. What had happened to Mason? Why was this so urgent? And what forces were at play that required her presence above all others? The helicopter's blades spun above them, slicing the night, illuminating the chaos below in strobing flashes. Emily's eyes locked on the building ahead, heart pounding, rain and fear blending into an electric anticipation. She had survived trauma before, but nothing had prepared her for this. And in that moment she understood. Her life and Mason's had become part of a story far larger than herself, one that would test every ounce of courage, intuition, and skill she possessed. The storm raged, the helicopter blades thundered, and Emily Carter took a deep breath. She was about to step fully into the unknown. The helicopter blades still roared in Emily Carter's ears as she stepped off the landing pad, boots splashing in puddles that reflected the harsh, blinding floodlights of Fort Lockridge. The rain had eased to a steady drizzle, but the air was thick with tension, electric as if the storm itself had followed them into the base. Soldiers moved with precision around her, rifles slung, eyes sharp and alert. Their movements were disciplined, rehearsed, but their glances toward her hinted at something deeper, something unspoken. Emily's pulse throbbed in her temples as the lead soldier gestured for her to follow. "This way, ma'am," he said, voice firm but low, carrying an authority that brooked no argument. She obeyed, though every step felt surreal. Just hours ago, she had been walking out of St. Aldan Memorial Hospital, exhausted but safe. Now she was immersed in a world she didn't understand, a world where every shadow seemed a threat, every face carried a secret, and every decision could carry irreversible consequences. Her thoughts flickered to Mason Hale, the memory of his pale, trembling face in the hospital, the way his eyes had found hers, the unspoken plea in his voice. He had called for her, insisted on her presence. She shivered despite the warmth of her soaked jacket. Whatever was happening here, she realized, was not routine. "Ma'am, we're taking you to the medical wing," the soldier said, guiding her toward a building reinforced with steel and concrete. Alarms blinked sporadically along the walls, their muted wails blending with the soft hum of generators. Every step echoed with a sense of urgency that gnawed at Emily's nerves. Inside, the medical wing was a stark contrast to the familiar environment of her hospital. Monitors beeped incessantly, the air smelled of antiseptic and ozone, and every surface gleamed with sterile efficiency. Soldiers hustled past with stretchers and medical bags, and in the midst of it all, a young medic shouted orders that made her head spin. Emily's eyes scanned the room, searching for Mason. Then she saw him. He was lying on a gurney, pale and tense, chest rising and falling with shallow, uneven breaths. His uniform was disheveled, torn at the cuff, and a thin line of sweat clung to his forehead despite the cold, controlled environment. The moment he saw her, his eyes lit up, not with fear, not with pain, but with relief, recognition, and something unspoken that tugged at her heart. "Mason," she whispered, rushing to his side. She gripped his hand instinctively, anchoring herself to him as though her presence alone could stabilize his frail body. He looked up at her, voice hoarse. "Emily, you came." "Of course I did," she said, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. "What's happening? What's going on?" He tried to speak, but his voice cracked and he clutched her hand harder. "Not here, they'll hear." Emily's pulse quickened. "Hear what, Mason, please, what is it?" He flinched at the movement of an approaching soldier and whispered urgently, "I never told them what really happened that night, but I'm telling you, you have to listen." Her stomach nodded, memories crashed forward, the explosion, the fire, the chaos of the battlefield. Mason had survived injuries that should have killed him, but there had always been gaps in the story he shared, fragments that didn't quite add up. Now, staring at him in the fluorescent glow of this militarized medical wing, Emily felt the weight of those secrets press against her like the storm outside. A nurse, Dr. Rios, stepped up beside her, mid-40s, sharp eyes, calm authority. "Emily," he said softly, voice low, "you're the only one he trusts right now. Don't let anyone intervene until you understand the situation." Emily nodded, though fear tightened her chest. What do you mean? Is he in danger?" Dr. Rios glanced toward the entrance, then back at her. "Ma'am, he's in more danger than you know, and time is critical. Whatever he's hiding, it has to be revealed before it's too late." Mason leaned closer, his voice barely audible over the ambient noise. "Emily, it wasn't an accident. The explosion, someone set it up, someone on the base." Emily's eyes widened. "Someone tried to hurt you." He nodded, trembling. "I saw the boots, the patch. I tried to report it, but no one believed me. They thought I was confused, but I'm not. I know who did it." A sudden noise made both of them flinch, footsteps approaching. Two officers appeared, faces impassive, moving with the precision and authority of seasoned military leaders. Emily stepped protectively in front of Mason. "He's not stable," she said sharply. "No questioning." The taller officer leaned in, voice low, almost a hiss. "Careful, Ms. Carter. People who ask too many questions here tend to disappear." Emily's heart raced. The warning cut through the storm inside her, cold and sharp. She had been trained to handle emergencies, to maintain calm under pressure, but this was different. This was a threat laced with secrecy and malice, and Mason's life hung in the balance. Dr. Rios moved closer, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. "Listen to me, Emily. You need to stay calm, follow his lead, protect him, and stay alert." Emily swallowed hard, nodding. The responsibility she had always carried in hospitals, the responsibility to preserve life, was magnified exponentially here. She wasn't just a nurse anymore. She was a shield, a confidant, a lifeline. The officers lingered, their eyes scanning her and Mason, calculating, cautious. Emily's mind raced with questions, but she forced herself to focus on the immediacy of the moment, stabilizing Mason, understanding the threat, and keeping him alive. "Emily," Mason whispered, leaning closer, "if they sedate me, I'm done. You have to promise me you'll be careful." Her throat tightened. "I promise," she said, gripping his hand firmly. She felt the tremor of his body beneath hers, the fear and exhaustion, and yet within that frail, wounded frame, she sensed resilience, determination, and a silent plea for trust. The officers finally retreated, but their presence lingered in the air like a shadow. Emily's pulse raced as she glanced around the medical wing. Every sound, every movement felt amplified. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside, a chaotic, electric tension that threatened to spill over at any moment. Dr. Rios guided Emily and Mason to a secluded section of the wing, away from the prying eyes and ears. "He needs privacy," Rios said, locking the door behind them. "Whatever he's going to tell you, it's critical that no one else hears." Mason's eyes searched hers, desperation and trust colliding in their depths. "Emily, I've been carrying this alone for too long. I can't, not anymore. I need you to know the truth." Emily's hands shook as she held his. "Tell me everything," she whispered. "I'm here, I won't leave you." He took a shuddering breath, then whispered the first fragment of a story that would unravel everything Emily thought she knew about Mason, the base, and the shadowy forces working in secret. And as he spoke, Emily realized that her role had shifted. She was no longer merely a nurse. She was a guardian of secrets, a protector in a war she had never enlisted for, and the only person Mason Hale could rely on. The storm outside intensified, lightning flashing through the windows, casting fleeting shadows across the room. Emily felt the weight of the moment, the tension, the danger, the unknown settling into her bones. Emily Carter's fingers gripped Mason Hale's wrist tightly as he leaned toward her, voice barely above a whisper. "Emily, you have to listen carefully. No one else can know this, not a single soul." His eyes darted to the door, then back to her. "The explosion, it wasn't an accident." Someone on the base wanted me dead. Emily's mind reeled, her hands shook, but she forced herself to remain calm. Someone from the base, she asked, incredulous. But why? Who would do that? Mason's jaw tightened. I don't know exactly who, but I recognized the insignia on their uniform. They were high-ranking, someone trusted to protect, but they betrayed me. His breathing hitched as the memories surged. I reported it, but my claims were dismissed. They said I was confused, overstressed, but I was. I saw them planting explosives in the supply depot. I saw their faces. Emily's stomach knotted. The reality of Mason's words pressed down like a physical weight. She had faced trauma in hospitals before, mass casualties, gunshot wounds, critical emergencies, but nothing compared to this, a deliberate attempt on a soldier's life by his own unit, right under the military's nose. Why did they want to kill you?" she asked, voice trembling. Mason swallowed, lips tight. "Because I found out about Operation Sentinel, a covert project. The explosion was meant to stop me from leaking information about it." Emily froze. Operation Sentinel. She'd heard the name whispered in classified medical briefings she'd attended as part of emergency disaster drills, but nothing concrete. A covert project, a secret no civilian was supposed to know, and Mason had seen too much. Her heart pounded. "You have to protect yourself, Mason," she whispered. "We need a plan." He shook his head, pain and fear etched across his face. "No, you have to protect yourself. You're the only one they can't manipulate. They respect me only because I follow orders. You have autonomy. You're unpredictable to them, and that's why they'll try to stop you too." Emily swallowed hard, every ounce of her nursing instinct, the same instinct that had guided her through trauma rooms, resuscitations, and surgeries, was screaming at her to act, to stabilize, to save. But this wasn't a hospital room. This wasn't a patient with vitals she could monitor with beeping machines and IV drips. This was a web of secrecy, betrayal, and danger she had been dragged into without warning. Before she could respond, a sudden alarm blared through the medical wing. Red lights flashed across the room, accompanied by a high-pitched siren. Emily's heart jumped into her throat. "What's happening?" she demanded. Mason's eyes were wide, panic flickering in the depths. "They've detected my location. Someone knows I'm here." The door to the room rattled as heavy boots pounded against the floor. Emily grabbed Mason's arm. "We have to move, now." Dr. Rios appeared at the threshold, eyes sharp and alert. "Emily, take him to the emergency exit. There's a secure tunnel leading to the secondary evacuation point. It's the only way to stay ahead of them." Emily nodded, adrenaline surging through her veins. She had carried patients through fire, smoke, and chaos before, but this was different. This was a labyrinth of betrayal, a maze of secrecy and danger. Every step could mean life or death. She helped Mason off the gurney, supporting his weight as they navigated the narrow corridors of the medical wing. The sirens blared and the lights flashed, casting long, erratic shadows along the walls. Soldiers they didn't recognize appeared around corners, their faces grim, their weapons raised. Emily's heart raced with every step, her mind calculating, adapting, reacting. They reached a reinforced door, marked with a red emergency evacuation route sign. Dr. Rios keyed in a code, and the door hissed open, revealing a dimly lit tunnel. The air was cool, damp, and smelled faintly of concrete and metal. Emily led Mason into the passage, her senses on high alert. As they moved, Mason whispered, "Emily, they've been watching me for weeks. Every movement, every conversation, they know my routines." Her pulse quickened. "Then we can't stop. We keep moving until we're safe. We find a secure location." The tunnel stretched ahead, winding and narrow. Emily's boots splashed in shallow puddles, echoing in the confined space. Mason leaned heavily on her, and she felt the weight of his trust pressing down on her shoulders. She was the only person who could keep him alive. Suddenly, a sound, metal scraping against metal, made her freeze. She pressed Mason against the wall, and they both listened. The noise grew closer, deliberate and measured. Someone was coming. "Emily, they're here," Mason whispered, panic threading his voice. Her mind raced. There were no exits, no weapons, no immediate help. The only option was to keep moving, to stay unpredictable, to survive. She adjusted Mason's grip, guiding him faster down the tunnel. They rounded a corner and entered a larger chamber within the tunnel network. Emergency lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows. At the far end, a group of soldiers emerged from a side passage, their faces masked by the storm outside. Emily's instincts took over. She pressed Mason against a support column, scanning the room for anything she could use: pipes, crates, emergency medical supplies. Her eyes landed on a fire extinguisher mounted to the wall. She grabbed it, ready to defend them if necessary. The soldiers advanced, their steps precise, confident. Emily could feel their intent, the cold calculation in their movements. She tightened her grip on the extinguisher, heart hammering in her chest. Mason's hand trembled against hers. Emily, SHH, she whispered, her own fear masked by a veneer of control. Stay close, follow my lead. The soldiers halted a few meters away, scanning the chamber. Emily's mind raced. Every scenario, every possibility ran through her head. They had to escape, but how? The tunnel network was labyrinthine, and these soldiers clearly knew it. They weren't just guarding, they were hunting. Suddenly, a faint vibration ran through the floor, the telltale sound of another helicopter approaching above ground. The base was in chaos, the storm masking the approach, the rotors cutting through the night like a blade. Emily's heart jumped. Could this be help or another threat? One of the soldiers barked an order, and the group split, flanking the chamber. Emily grabbed Mason's arm, pulling him toward a narrow service passage she had spotted earlier. The soldiers noticed and began to pursue. Adrenaline surged. Emily pushed Mason forward, ducking into the tight passage. The walls scraped against their shoulders, and water dripped from the ceiling. She could hear the soldiers behind them, voices raised in command, boots splashing in the shallow water. They ran, twisted, turned, and finally emerged into a wider section of the tunnel network. Emily's lungs burned, her legs ached, but she forced herself to keep moving. Every step was a gamble, every corner a potential ambush. Finally, they reached a reinforced door marked Secure Evacuation Exit, Level 2. Emily keyed in the emergency code Dr. Rios had given her. The door hissed open, revealing a small vehicle bay illuminated by emergency lights. Outside, armored transport vehicles waited, engines idling, ready to move at a moment's notice. Emily guided Mason toward the nearest vehicle. Soldiers surrounded them, but these were allies, trustworthy, disciplined, protective. She felt a flicker of hope. As they climbed in, the vehicle doors sealed behind them. Emily slumped against the seat, heart pounding, rain dripping from her soaked hair. Mason looked at her, eyes wide with relief. "You saved me," he whispered. Emily shook her head, voice firm. "No, we survived together, and we're not done yet." The vehicle began to move, the armored wheels rolling over wet concrete. Outside, the storm continued to rage, lightning illuminating the chaos of Fort Lockridge. Emily stared ahead, mind racing. Mason had survived the explosion. They had evaded the soldiers hunting them, but the true threat, Operation Sentinel and those who sought to silence it, was still out there. She realized with a cold certainty that their struggle had only just begun. Part 5 End, the vehicle sped through the storm-soaked base, and Emily knew one thing with unshakable clarity. Every second counted, every move was life or death, and the secrets Mason carried were worth killing for. And someone was willing to kill them both to keep them hidden. The armored vehicle rolled silently through the rain-slicked streets of Fort Lockridge, its thick wheels crunching over scattered debris and puddles. Emily Carter sat rigid in the passenger seat, soaked to the bone, gripping Mason Hale's hand as tightly as she could without crushing it. The tension between them was a living thing, coiling around her chest and threatening to strangle rational thought. Mason's pale face was drawn tight with exhaustion, his breathing shallow and uneven. Emily's nurse instinct screamed at her to assess, monitor, stabilize, but there were no machines here, no monitors, no IVs. Only the storm outside, the armored walls of the vehicle, and the knowledge that whoever had tried to kill him once could strike again at any moment. "Where are we going?" Mason whispered, voice barely audible over the low hum of the vehicle. "Somewhere safe," Emily said, though the words felt hollow even as they left her lips. "I don't know exactly, but Dr. Rios promised a secure location, a place where you can," she stopped herself, "where you can tell me everything." Mason swallowed, the movement painful. It's not just me, Emily. This Operation Sentinel, it's bigger than anyone outside knows. They've been watching, planning, waiting for years." Emily's stomach tightened. Her mind conjured images of shadowy figures in offices, strategic maps, encrypted communications, all the hidden, deadly machinery that could exist behind the walls of a military base. "How many are involved?" she asked. Mason shook his head, eyes darting to the armored windows as if the walls themselves had ears. "Too many. High-ranking officers, scientists, contractors, even medics. I don't know who to trust. That's why I called for you." Emily's pulse quickened. She felt the crushing weight of responsibility. Here, in the back of a storm-battered, armored vehicle, she wasn't just a nurse. She was a guardian, a confidant, the only person Mason trusted to survive long enough to reveal the truth. The vehicle came to a sudden stop. Emily's head snapped forward, a sharp jolt reverberating through her spine. The driver's voice cut through the storm and the hum of the engine. "Secure location ahead. Wait here until we're cleared." Emily unbuckled her seatbelt and scanned the small interior. Mason leaned heavily against the side, trembling. She reached for his arm. "Stay with me," she said, voice firm despite the rising panic inside her. Moments later, the back doors of the vehicle hissed open. Outside, the rain had softened to a drizzle, but the night was still alive with tension. A series of black SUVs were parked discreetly near a low-profile building, heavily reinforced and nondescript. Armed guards flanked the entrance, their stances rigid, eyes scanning the shadows for threats. Emily helped Mason out of the vehicle, supporting his weight as they approached the building. The soldiers guiding them moved with military precision, clearly trained for rapid extraction and protection. Every step felt like walking a tightrope over an unseen chasm. One misstep could spell disaster. Inside, the safe house was a stark contrast to the chaos outside. Fluorescent lights bathed the room in harsh white, casting long shadows on steel walls lined with medical equipment, computers, and communication devices. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and ozone, the sterile odor underscoring the urgency of the space. Dr. Rios was already there, along with a small team of trusted medics and soldiers. He stepped forward immediately, his expression tight with concern. "Emily, we've got him stabilized for the moment, but he needs to talk, and you're the only one who can get him to open up fully." Emily nodded, kneeling beside Mason's gurney. She ran her hands over his forearm, checking for tension, his pulse, signs of internal distress. He flinched but didn't resist. His trust in her was absolute, palpable, and heavy with responsibility. "Tell me everything," she said softly, leaning closer so that only he could hear. Mason took a shuddering breath. "Operation Sentinel, it's a covert weapons project. They're developing experimental technology, bioweapons, surveillance systems, energy weapons. And they're testing it right here on base, on soldiers, on civilians, on anyone who gets in the way." Emily's stomach churned. The nurse in her wanted to vomit. The human instinct to preserve life collided violently with the reality of what Mason was revealing. "Testing on soldiers, on people?" she asked, voice tight. He nodded. "They don't care who gets hurt, and when I discovered part of it, the lab, the experiments, the casualties, they realized I could expose them. That's why the explosion happened. That's why people tried to silence me." Emily's mind raced. Explosions, secret labs, classified experiments, betrayal from within the military. She had faced emergencies, life-and-death situations, but this was something else, something bigger, deadlier, and entirely unregulated. She tightened her grip on his hand. "Then we have to stop them. We have to tell someone, make sure this doesn't continue." Mason's lips pressed into a thin line. "We can't, not yet. They have eyes everywhere. Even here, they could be listening. They'll know if we try to contact outside agencies. The only way is to gather proof first and survive long enough to get it out." Emily swallowed hard. The magnitude of their situation pressed down like a physical weight. Every skill she had as a nurse, the ability to stay calm, to think critically, to act decisively, was now interwoven with strategy, secrecy, and survival. Her role had expanded beyond healing. She was a protector, a confidant, a shield against a world that wanted to kill Mason and bury the truth. A soft beep drew her attention. Mason flinched as a monitor lit up beside him. Dr. Rios stepped forward, voice low. "We've stabilized his vitals for now, but his condition is fragile. Emily, whatever he tells you, you must remain calm. He needs you more than ever." Emily nodded, staring at Mason's pale, exhausted face. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm not leaving." He exhaled shakily. "Emily, there's more. There's a faction within the base actively hunting me. They've infiltrated multiple departments, medical, intelligence, security. They have no conscience, no loyalty, no limits." Her pulse spiked. "Then we need a plan. We need allies, safe paths, contingencies." Mason shook his head. "We can't trust anyone outside this room. Not yet, not until we have proof." Emily's gaze hardened. "Then we'll make proof. We'll survive long enough to expose them, together." A long silence stretched between them. The storm outside raged, lightning flashing intermittently through the small windows. The quiet inside was heavy with tension, the calm before a storm that neither of them could fully see or control. Dr. Rios broke the silence, voice low and urgent. "Emily, you'll need to help him remain conscious and focused. If his condition deteriorates, the enemy could close in at any moment. Every second counts." Emily nodded, understanding fully. Her hands hovered over Mason's pulse, her eyes scanning for any change in color, temperature, or tension. This was no longer a hospital emergency. It was a war, a battle of survival against invisible enemies, and she was the linchpin. Mason leaned closer, voice barely a whisper. "Emily, I need you to promise me something. No matter what happens, you keep fighting. You don't let them win. Not me, not anyone." I promise, she said, gripping his hand with iron determination. I won't let them win, not while I'm standing. Outside, the storm battered the safe house, lightning illuminating the reinforced walls, casting fleeting shadows of danger and uncertainty. Inside, Emily and Mason prepared for the long, perilous night ahead, a night filled with secrets, threats, and the unrelenting pressure of survival. The night outside Fort Lockridge had grown darker, the storm retreating but leaving the air electric and tense, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Inside the safe house, Emily Carter paced silently, keeping one eye on Mason Hale as he rested on the gurney. His breathing was shallow but steady for now, though every twitch, every flinch of muscle kept her nerves on edge. The small team of medics and soldiers surrounding them moved like shadows, each alert, each aware that the walls they trusted might not hold against the forces closing in. Every creak in the building, every drip of water from the leaky ceiling, made Emily's pulse quicken. Mason's eyes met hers, hollow but resolute. They're here, he whispered. Emily froze. Who's here? They've infiltrated the perimeter. I saw 2 figures near the supply entrance before we arrived. They're waiting, watching, probably armed. His lips tightened. They know where we are. They've always known. They just needed me alive long enough to lead them to proof or die trying. Emily's stomach twisted. Then we need to move. We need to get out before they realize we're cornered. Dr. Rios approached, voice low and urgent. There's no time. We've got a contingency plan. Tunnel 7B, emergency exit to the secondary perimeter. But it's a gamble. Only a handful of us can go, and you'll have to protect him every step of the way. Emily swallowed hard. Every instinct she had as a nurse screamed at her to keep Mason still, to monitor, to prevent exhaustion. But the shadows of danger pressed closer. There was no staying still. Survival required movement, strategy, and courage she had barely tested. She nodded, gripping Mason's hand. We move now. The team navigated the dimly lit corridors, their footsteps muffled by the thick rubber mats lining the floors. Emily led Mason, keeping him close to her side, eyes scanning every shadow, every corner. Her mind raced, thinking ahead, calculating, anticipating. One wrong move, one split second of hesitation, and they could be lost. They reached the junction where Tunnel 7B branched from the main corridor. Dr. Rios keyed in a code, and the door hissed open. Darkness stretched before them, a narrow passage lined with concrete and exposed pipes, dim emergency lights casting flickering shadows. Move quickly, Dr. Rios whispered, but stay silent, every sound counts. Emily nodded, guiding Mason into the tunnel. The moment their boots hit the concrete floor, a metallic click echoed from behind them. She froze, heart hammering. The soldiers behind them vanished into the shadows, leaving Emily and Mason exposed. The click repeated, louder, deliberate. Then a low, menacing voice echoed from the darkness. You shouldn't have come here. Emily's stomach dropped. She pressed Mason against the wall, fire extinguisher from earlier gripped tightly in her hand. Shadows moved, 2 figures stepping into the faint light, their faces masked, rifles aimed directly at them. Mason flinched. Emily, they're here. Her mind raced. The figures were trained, disciplined, ruthless. Every movement calculated. They weren't here to negotiate, they were here to eliminate. Emily's pulse surged. Stay behind me, she whispered. Don't move unless I tell you. The first figure advanced, and Emily reacted instinctively. She swung the fire extinguisher in a wide arc, connecting with the attacker's shoulder. A grunt, a stumble, and the momentary distraction allowed Mason to pull himself closer behind her. Shots rang out, ricocheting off the concrete walls. The tunnel erupted into chaos. Emily ducked, rolling behind a support column, heart hammering, lungs burning. Mason clung to her, trembling, but she could see the determination in his eyes, the same determination that had kept him alive through the explosion, through betrayal, through the nightmare that had become their lives. Emily, what do we do? He shouted over the gunfire. Move, she barked, adrenaline sharpening her focus. Follow me now. They sprinted down the tunnel, boots splashing in shallow puddles, bullets pinging off walls, sparks flying from exposed conduits. Emily guided Mason through twists and turns, every step a calculated gamble, every decision life or death. The attackers split, flanking them from both sides. Emily's mind raced. There was no time for hesitation. She grabbed a metal pipe lying against the wall, swinging it with precision, knocking one assailant off balance. Mason ducked instinctively as she swung again, creating a path forward. Finally, they reached a junction leading to a secondary exit, a small hatch, reinforced but accessible. Emily keyed in the emergency code Dr. Rios had given her. The hatch creaked open, revealing a narrow stairwell leading upward. They climbed, panting, muscles burning, hearts pounding in unison. Emily's mind ran through contingencies, every possible angle. Behind them, the attackers' shouts echoed through the tunnel, frustration, rage, relentless pursuit. At last, they emerged into a dimly lit underground courtyard, empty save for a single armored SUV waiting. Emily helped Mason into the backseat, her hands shaking but steady. She slid in beside him, heart racing. The vehicle lurched forward, tires crunching on gravel, engines roaring. Emily kept one hand on Mason's arm, watching the rearview as shadows flitted in the distance, soldiers, masked, relentless. Mason exhaled, trembling. I didn't think we'd make it. You're alive, Emily said firmly, and we're not done yet, not until this is over. The vehicle sped through the base, weaving through debris, past emergency lighting flashing in the storm's remnants. Emily felt a flicker of hope, but it was fragile, fleeting. The attackers weren't just skilled, they were part of a larger network, and every move Emily and Mason made was being anticipated. Finally, they reached a secluded, reinforced building, the secondary safe house. Guards opened the doors, ushering them inside. Emily helped Mason onto a secure gurney, checking his vitals immediately. Dr. Rios approached, expression grave. They knew exactly where to hit. This was a test. They're watching and they're learning. You survived tonight, but it's only the beginning. Emily's hands clenched into fists. Then we prepare, we fight back, we get proof, and we expose them. Mason's eyes met hers, a mix of exhaustion and trust. Emily, I don't know if I could survive this without you. You won't have to, she said, voice firm. We survive together, and we make sure they pay for every life they've endangered. Outside, the storm had finally passed, leaving a tense, heavy silence. But inside, Emily and Mason knew the truth. Operation Sentinel was vast, deadly, and relentless, and the hunters would not stop until they had silenced every threat. The safe house was quiet now, deceptively calm. Outside, the remnants of the storm lingered, a damp fog clinging to the edges of Fort Lockridge, swirling around empty streets and darkened vehicles. Inside, Emily Carter and Mason Hale prepared for what they both knew would be the decisive night. Emily stood over Mason's gurney, checking his vitals. His pulse was steady, his breathing controlled, but exhaustion and fear etched every line of his face. She had stabilized him physically, but she knew Operation Sentinel's true danger lay beyond injuries. It was a war of shadows, secrecy, and strategy, and tonight they would strike back. Dr. Rios stepped into the room, holding a tablet displaying encrypted files. Emily Mason, this is everything we've gathered so far, he said, voice low but urgent. Blueprints, communications, personnel lists, the proof that Operation Sentinel is real, that the explosions, the experiments, the disappearances, they're all part of a single, deadly agenda. Emily scanned the files, her eyes widening at the breadth of the conspiracy. The project wasn't just a secret weapons program, it was a rogue operation with ties across the military, intelligence agencies, and private contractors. Every piece of evidence represented lives at risk, the potential for global consequences. Her hands clenched into fists. Mason exhaled shakily. We can't let this continue. We have to get this out, but we need a way to deliver it safely. Emily's mind raced. They couldn't trust the standard military channels. They were compromised. They needed a secure, independent line, a platform that would survive Operation Sentinel's reach. We use the media, she said finally. Encrypted, untraceable. They can't silence it once it's live. Dr. Rios nodded slowly. There's a secure communications terminal in the command center, but you'll have to move through the base's interior to reach it. That area is heavily monitored, and Sentinel's operatives are likely nearby. Emily's pulse surged, every instinct screamed danger, but the nurse in her, the protector in her, held firm. Then we go now, she said, helping Mason to his feet. His trembling frame leaned on her, but she held him steady, every step a deliberate act of courage. The corridors outside the safe house were dim, shadows stretching long under flickering fluorescent lights. Emily led Mason carefully, scanning every corner, every doorway. The first obstacle appeared almost immediately, two figures rounding a corner, rifles raised. Emily pressed Mason against the wall, her hands instinctively searching for cover. One of the figures stepped forward. Halt, the masked soldier barked. Emily didn't hesitate. With a burst of adrenaline, she grabbed a nearby fire extinguisher and swung, knocking the attacker backward. Mason ducked instinctively, and the second figure hesitated, giving them a fraction of a second to sprint past, disappearing into the shadows. The sound of footsteps echoed behind them, relentless. Emily's mind worked rapidly, every exit, every blind spot, every structural weakness. They reached a junction and split down a narrow service passage, the walls scraping against their shoulders. Every step was measured, every breath calculated. They emerged into the command center, a hub of monitors, encrypted terminals, and a small skeleton crew of Sentinel operatives who hadn't expected anyone to reach this point. Emily and Mason froze, hearts pounding, but Mason's resolve sharpened. "Emily, we have one chance." With a nod, Emily pressed him against the console, guiding him to the secure terminal. Mason began uploading the files, hands shaking but steady. Emily kept watch, eyes scanning the room, every instinct alert. The operatives noticed too late. One lunged toward them, but Emily acted instinctively, knocking a nearby chair into him. He crashed to the floor, groaning, buying Mason precious seconds. A second operative advanced, and Emily grabbed a nearby pipe, swinging it with precision. The man staggered backward, stunned. Mason's fingers flew over the terminal, encrypting the files and sending them to multiple secure channels, journalists, whistleblower platforms, international oversight committees. Emily's breath came in short, ragged gasps. The operatives were relentless, closing in, but Mason's determination never wavered. Finally, a soft chime indicated the upload was complete. Mason exhaled, relief washing over his face. "It's done, Emily, it's out." Emily's stomach sank even as hope surged. The operatives wouldn't surrender easily. They lunged, weapons raised. Emily ducked, swung, and shoved Mason toward a side exit. The narrow hallways became a gauntlet of chaos, shouts, gunfire ricocheting, sparks from electrical panels illuminating the nightmarish scene. Suddenly the building shook, a controlled detonation somewhere nearby. Emily grabbed Mason, running instinctively. The walls reverberated, dust falling from the ceiling. She could hear the operatives' frustrated shouts echoing, but she didn't look back. Every step carried them closer to survival, closer to exposing Operation Sentinel, closer to justice. They reached the outer courtyard, rain beginning to fall again, mixing with the haze from smoke and debris. Vehicles waited, armored and ready. Emily helped Mason into one, her hands steady despite exhaustion. She climbed in after him. "Hold on," she said, and the vehicle roared to life, tires skimming over gravel and wet concrete. They sped away, the safe house disappearing behind them in a blur of lights and shadows. As they moved toward extraction, Mason exhaled, trembling. "Emily, you saved me. You saved everything." Emily shook her head. "No, we saved it together, and we're not done yet. This isn't over until the world knows what they tried to hide." Outside the vehicle, the fog lifted slightly, revealing a world still dark and uncertain, but a world now illuminated by truth. The files Mason had carried, the lives at risk, the conspiracy's deadly core, now they were exposed, untouchable by shadowy operatives who had relied on secrecy to survive. Emily leaned back, watching the storm break over the horizon. The adrenaline ebbed, leaving exhaustion and relief in its place. Mason's hand found hers, and for the first time in hours, they allowed themselves to breathe, to hope. Dr. Rios spoke through the intercom. "You did it. The evidence is secure. Sentinel will be dismantled. They may try to retaliate, but the world now knows." Emily's lips curved into a tired, determined smile. "Then we keep moving forward. Mason, we survived the storm together." Mason squeezed her hand, a weak but genuine smile crossing his face. "Together." For a moment, silence reigned in the vehicle, broken only by the hum of the engine and the distant, fatting storm. Outside, the world awaited the revelation they had delivered, a reckoning for Operation Sentinel, a testament to courage, trust, and resilience in the face of overwhelming danger. Emily Carter, nurse and guardian, had crossed into a world of shadows and emerged not just unbroken, but victorious. Mason Hale, survivor and whistleblower, had entrusted his life to her, and she had proven that courage, skill, and unwavering loyalty could conquer even the darkest forces.